ever find yourself looking out of the plane of a window of a plane at night and marveling at the strange beauty of our illuminated world? I do. In less than 140 years, we've gone from the invention of a single electric light bulb to a planet filled with nighttime illumination. It's incredibly beautiful and in many ways feels magical and completely unimaginable to anyone who lived 200 years ago. Lurking behind this magic, beauty, and improved quality of life is the largest contributor to global warming. Electricity consumption accounts for 30% of carbon emissions in the United States. It took us 100 years to get here. The question is, can we turn it around and get to zero carbon energy in the next 100? Yes, absolutely we can. We can get there in much less time. Clean energy is realistic. It's absolutely necessary to maintain our quality of life. And the changes in the electricity industry are already in motion to make this happen. I'm Natalie Musick, Director of Product Management at Oracle Utilities, formerly OPower. For the past 7 years, I've been leading teams to build software for utilities to help engage their customers, reduce overall energy usage. And I'd like to share with you my perspective on how the utility industry is evolving to meet the needs of the clean energy future. There are 3 key forces driving this change. And these slides are my old slides. So I'm going to have to wing it a little bit. So the first one is energy generation. We're shifting from fossil fuel generation to renewables. The second one is an increase in electricity usage as we switch over from gas-powered cars to electric cars. And the third one is that government regulations will continue to increase alongside these market forces to regulate changes. So I'm going to just skip forward a little bit here. So first, building renewable capacity is finally cheaper than building new coal or nuclear power plants. In the past year, over 2/3 of new power capacity came from renewables across the globe. This is a huge milestone. And these new sources come with additional challenges. Wind and solar are highly intermittent, while coal and nuclear have long been the stability and source of consistent energy throughout the grid. And underlying these trends is the decrease in the cost of solar in the last half century. So in 1973, the first solar roof was built at $300 a watt. This is literally off the chart. Last year, 1% of the US generation came from solar at a price point of just over $1 a watt. And by 2040, we expect that 10% of US generation will come from solar. When you add in the cost of new construction, new renewables currently kill new coal plants, and I expect within 25 years will kill new natural gas plants as well. Another powerful force is government policy. So we're obviously in a dark time when it comes to environmental policy. But in 2012, Obama passed the Clean Power Plan that requires utilities to cut their carbon by 1/3 by 2030. Now, as long as Trump does not tear that down, this will help hasten the end of coal. Policy has already driven real change. To illustrate this change, let's look at California, a state that's long led energy policy. With energy policy starting in the 70s, they were able to stop the increase of per capita consumption growth by the early 80s. National policy did not achieve these results until 2000. Now, the policies which made this happen were many, and the specifics of them are very critical, as well as their timing, which I will not have time to go into right now. But we expect that this per capita consumption is about to increase. Why? This year, GM and Volvo announced that they'll be cutting production of gas-only vehicles to zero within 10 years. Thanks to companies like Tesla and government rebates on electric cars, we've seen a huge drop to produce electric vehicles, making them cost competitive with gas-powered vehicles. So a little history. Electric cars have had some fits and starts over the last century. Did you know that in 1905, nearly 1/3 of cars manufactured in the US were electric? And in 1920, they were dead due to the Ford Model T. Then in the 90s, GM built the next wave and killed them by the late 90s. Last year, there were 2 million electric vehicles on the road in the United States. Now, predictions vary, but we expect that there may be as many as 70 million electric cars and trucks on the road by 2040. And what this means is a greatly increased demand for electricity and an increase in that per capita consumption. Additionally, building energy is shifting toward electricity, as we're seeing space heating and water heating becoming cheaper and more efficient sources of electricity. So now, what does this all mean for the electric utility? So I'm going to skip back slides to where, it's a little hard. So this one. So the traditional utility model is one of building and maintaining large-scale infrastructure. So you've got power plants to generate electricity, transmission towers and distribution lines to move that energy, and with the primary goal of serving the right amount of electricity at the right time to every customer at the lowest cost. So that's your classic model. And these changeables, moving to renewable, switching to increase of electricity usage for vehicles, increasing demand, is shifting this somewhat linear, straightforward model to one that is much more complex, distributed, and dynamic. There we go. So what are utilities doing? They are beginning to invest in large renewable sources to replace their gas, coal, and nuclear power plants, adding battery storage to the infrastructure so that they can have that electricity when they need it because of these intermittent sources. Solar energy will be distributed throughout commercial and residential buildings. In some places it will have its own storage, and other places it won't. And so the big challenge here is to integrate all of this data from these distributed sources and to predict and analyze in order to have a smooth energy on the grid. Sorry. So weather modeling is going to be critical. And to effectively provide these services, utilities are going to need access to additional data that they don't have today. They don't have these data because they live behind the meter. So there's solar generation data, electric vehicle usage, thermostat set points. These currently aren't available to utilities, but in order to be able to manage the flow of energy on this whole grid, they're going to need access to that data. So on the electrification front, with the increase in electric vehicles and consumption of buildings, that we're going to have an overall per capita demand increase, which means you're going to need more supply. Charging infrastructure is already being built, beginning, and so they'll have large charging infrastructure, large-scale charging stations, and like solar, that charging is going to be distributed throughout the consumer sphere as well. So key to all of this is delivering electricity at the right time for the right price. So in order to control the flow of electricity, rates will largely be based on particular times of day, based on demand and supply, in order to help balance the flow of electricity on the grid. And so in the next few years, we also expect that automakers will make cars that can discharge energy back to the grid. So utilities will now have to work with car owners to help them store energy and use it back to the grid when it's needed. So all of this has really big, real human impacts. It's complicated to understand and manage. So we consumers are becoming electricity providers, charging our cars at home, and increasingly becoming dependent on home electronics for automated climate controls, as well as restocking our refrigerators. So people will spend more of their money on electricity, and the price of that electricity will largely depend on the time of day that electricity is used. And now, when a blackout happens, you not only lose your lights and your refrigeration, you lose your mobility, you lose more of your heating in your house, and you lose your shopping list. So utilities are responsible for keeping our society rolling along smoothly. And as we switch from fossil fuels to electricity, those large gas and oil companies, Shell and Exxon, begin to disappear. Electric utilities take on more power and responsibility. So it's this increase in prominence, sophistication, and relationship with customers that I see as one of the most important changes happening in the utility industry today. And it happens to be the area that I focus on every day in my daily life. And you could too, because we are hiring at OPower. So zooming back out to the big picture, all of this means a lifetime of hard work. Us and everyone and millions of people around the world are working every day to make give momentum to these forces of change, and it's making a big difference. The cost of renewables, batteries, and clean energy vehicles are enough to keep those markets moving forward and growing without government support, but of course government can speed things up or slow them down. And the electric utilities, with some challenges that are solvable, they already have the infrastructure to deliver renewable energy to where it's needed. So this clean energy evolution is happening, and I have hope that the next generation will be able to have a full revolution to a sustainable society. Thank you.